Alhamdulillah, how are you? Set? Higher? Lower? It's okay? Yeah. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa azwajihi wa dhurriyatihi wa ashabihi wa man wala, wa ba'du falhamdulillah, thumma alhamdulillah. Allahumma salli wa salam wa barik ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa barik wa salam. Allahumma barik lana fi Sha'ban wa ballagna Ramadan. May Allah bless us in the remainder of this month of Sha'ban and allow us to make it and witness the blessed month of Ramadan. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. The objective of tonight's discussion is receiving Ramadan. And in receiving Ramadan, it means exactly that. That we don't wait for Ramadan to arrive before we start ramping up the good deeds. That's not the proper way to do it. It's almost as if when you have a guest that you're expecting, you don't fix the house once they arrive. You don't cook the food when they arrive. You don't leave to the supermarket or to the grocery store when they arrive. You do all of that in preparation for the honored guest. And they arrive, mashallah, to the smell of delicious food on the stove or in the oven. And they arrive, mashallah, to a nice, clean home, mashallah. And one of the blessings of duyuf, one of the blessings of having guests, it's one of those few times when we actually clean our house, mashallah. So there's a lot of barakat that come with having guests. Ramadan is our guest, and it's something that we want to. Ikramul dayf is from the quality of the believer. Honoring your guest is from the sifat of the believer, and we try to do that for this blessed month. So in doing that, I wanted to just briefly summarize some of the points that were mentioned during the khutbah, one of which was a hadith narrated that our mother, one of the wives of the Prophet Salama radiallahu anha, and also from Aisha radiallahu anha, two of his wives narrate this. And this is one of the wisdoms of having the Prophet ﷺ, right? One of the wisdoms of having multiple wives was it was through them that much of the private life of our Prophet ﷺ was transmitted. The private life of our Prophet ﷺ, how he was in his home. Things like fasting, right? When you fast, not everyone is privy to this. You go about your day, no one will necessarily know, but your wife will know. You come home, you're not eating in normal times, or you're waiting until Maghrib before you have a particular type of a meal. Usually your family will know. So there were, your private worship, your private acts of worship, those du'as that you would make in the night, you will find that those who were closest to the Prophet ﷺ, namely those in his household, would narrate these things. So one hadith was from Salama, may Allah be pleased with her, where she mentions, مَا رَأَيْتُ النَّبِيَّ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ يَصُومُ شَهْرَيْنِ مُتَتَابِعَيْنِ إِلَّا شَعْبَانَ وَرَمَضَانَ. That I never saw the Prophet ﷺ fasting 2 consecutive months, except for the month of Ramadan, of Sha'ban and Ramadan. He would fast them together. And then Aisha radiallahu anha also mentioned that مَا رَأَيْتُ النَّبِيَّ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم فِي شَهْرٍ أَكْثَرَ صِيَامًا مِنْهُ فِي شَعْبَانَ كَانَ يَصُومُهُ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا بَلْ كَانَ يَصُومُهُ كُلَّهُ. And she mentioned that I never saw the Prophet ﷺ fasting in any month more than he would fast in the month of Sha'ban. Of course, outside of Ramadan. More than the month of Sha'ban. He used to fast most of it, rather he would fast all of it. So this was his habit now. And why was he doing this? In preparation for the month of Ramadan. One of the wisdoms why. In excitement of increasing the good deeds. And the Prophet ﷺ, who had strength physically and spiritually that we don't necessarily have, he was capable of doing this, fasting for 2 consecutive months on a regular basis. But we also know because Imam Tirmidhi, rahimahullah, who's one of the great muhaddithin, scholars of hadith in our tradition, oftentimes we hear like hadith quoted from Imam Bukhari, maybe Imam Muslim, and that's the extent of what we know. There's a sound hadith in Bukhari, or there's a sound hadith in Muslim. But our tradition is not limited to the Sahihain, as amazing as those collections are. But for starters, we have the Sihah Sitta, the 6 authentic canons of hadith. So Imam Tirmidhi was one of those 6 great muhaddithin. He mentions these hadith in his collection, and right after mentioning these 2 hadith about the Prophet ﷺ fasting for both months consecutively, he then mentions the next chapter right after that is Babu ma ja'a fi karahiyati as-sawm fi an-nisf ath-thani min Sha'ban li hali Ramadan. The chapter regarding the dislike and reprehensibility of fasting in the second half of Sha'ban because of Ramadan. Meaning that it's makruh. It's considered dislike actually if someone were to fast the entirety of the month of Sha'ban, even though our Prophet ﷺ did it. Why? Because most of us are not capable of fasting for 2 consecutive months. And in our overzealousness, we may actually burn ourselves out. Let me fast the entire month, and then when Ramadan comes out, we're burnt out. So there's a hadith that he mentions, also from our Prophet ﷺ, where the Prophet ﷺ mentions, إِذَا بَقِيَ نِصْفُ مِنْ شَعْبَانَ فَلَا تَصُومُوا, that when the last half of Sha'ban comes, then don't fast. So even though it's contrary to what he did, what he says takes precedence over what he did. Because when he says something, it's very specific, that this is what he wants us to do, and that's why he's telling us. And what he did may have been specific to himself, which is why he didn't necessarily tell us. And that's one of those examples of where his speech will have precedence over his actions. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So this is now kind of a recap with a little bit extra of what was mentioned in the khutbah, that the Prophet ﷺ would fast the entirety of this month, but the lesson that we get is we should start increasing our good deeds. So whether it's fasting more, even if it's not the entire month, even if it's not the entirety of the first 15 days, it should be something more than what we normally do. So if we normally fast once a week, fast twice a week. If you normally fast twice a week, fast 3 times a week for the rest of this month. MashaAllah, if you're already a person who's fasting 3 days a week, fast 4 days a week. Do more than what we're normal. You read Quran normally, read more Quran. If we're not reading Quran normally like we should be, every day for the rest of this month, make it a point that you will open the Mus'haf and read the Quran. If we normally pray and right after saying salam, we hurry to what we have to do, sit for an extra 1 minute, more than you're used to sitting after salah. These are some practical things that we can do every single day now, leading up until Ramadan, so that we can properly receive Ramadan. Sit for 1 extra minute, which is literally nothing. We waste so much time in other things. Sit for 1 extra minute after every single prayer, if not to make some extra dhikr, to raise your hands and make some extra dua. Ask from Allah. We have so many things going on in our life. We have so many problems in our life. We have so many problems in the world. We have so many problems in the ummah of our Prophet ﷺ, that he used to weep for his ummah every single day. Make some extra dua every single day and after every single prayer, even for just 60 seconds. The point being is we should increase whatever it is that we're doing. Now, one of the things that we can try to do, because today was the 8th day of Sha'ban, tonight and tomorrow being the 9th day of Sha'ban. We have about 1 more week left until the first half of Ramadan is done. So, while we can increase our good deeds for the entirety of the rest of the month, fasting should be only up until next week, after which we kind of start regaining our strength for Ramadan. So, in this coming week, when it comes to fasting, Mondays and Thursdays are typically a sunnah to try to fast. We may try to fast on a Monday and a Thursday of next week. If we want to try to get 3 days in though, the Prophet ﷺ actually mentions in a hadith from Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, Awsani Khalili bi thalath, that my friend, my Khalil, and the companions would do this sometimes, when they would share a very intimate memory of their Prophet, of our Prophet ﷺ that they had, they would refer to him with a term of endearment. In this case, my dear friend. The Khalil is like your closest, most intimate friend. Not just like a Sadiq, but your Khalil. And Abu Hurairah then mentions that, Awsani Khalili bi thalath, that my dear friend advised me to do 3 things. La ad'uhunna hatta amut. I will never leave them until I die. Sawmu thalathati ayamin min kulli shahr, fasting 3 days every month. Wa salatul duha, and the forenoon prayers. The salatul duha could be made anytime after the sunrise until the entering of dhuhr prayer. That late morning prayer is what we call salatul duha, and it was a regular practice of our Prophet ﷺ. If that's something we don't do regularly or have never done, we should also maybe take the opportunity of praying that. There's many mornings, if it's not every day, maybe on a weekend, on a Saturday morning, on a Sunday morning, when we're just relaxing. Try to make this intention. Today is Friday, tomorrow is Saturday. Many of us are off of work. We will have some time available tomorrow morning. Take some time tomorrow morning, if it's not our regular habit, to say, oh Allah, I'm going to act on this thing that I heard last night. Maybe I've heard about it before, but maybe I don't do it regularly. That tomorrow morning, inshallah, sometime after sunrise until dhuhr time, I will make wudu and pray 2 rakats with the intention of salatul duha, acting on the advice of Rasulullah, our Prophet ﷺ. And he said that this was the second thing. The first was fasting 3 days a month. The second thing was salatul duha, wa nawmun ala witr, and then sleeping after having prayed the salatul witr. This is also something we should have as a regular habit. Now, those 3 days, what are those 3 days a month? They could be any 3 days a month technically, but specifically, you look in the other ahadith and you can find and isolate specifically what 3 days these days are. Which 3 days these are. So, Abdullah bin Amr ibn al-As, radiallahu anhum ajma'een, he mentioned that قال لي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن بحسبك أن تصوم كل شهر 3 أيام فإن لك بكل حسنة 10 أمثالها فإن ذلك صيام الدهر كله. He mentions that it would suffice you to fast 3 days every month. It would suffice you to fast 3 days every month, because every deed will be multiplied times 10. So this will be as if you fasted for the entirety of your life. 3 days a month, because it's times 10, which is 30 days a month. So it becomes like you're fasting the entirety of fasting the whole month every month. As for the specific 3 days, the next hadith mentions, إِذَا صُمْتَ شَيْئًا مِنَ الشَّهْرِ فَصُمْ 13 وَأَرْبَعَ عَشْرَةَ وَخَمْسَ عَشْرَةَ. Rawahu Tirmidhi. Imam Tirmidhi also mentions in another hadith, if you are going to fast anything in a month, fast the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th day. These are known as the Ayyamul Bid, literally the white days, or the radiant days, because this is when the moon is full. So the moon will be full during the 13th, 14th, and then the 15th is when you have a full moon, the 14th or the 15th, depending on the length of the month, 29 or 30 days. So the Prophet ﷺ also encourages us to fast these 3 days. Now, this is in general throughout the year, but with this coming week, it becomes compounded type of blessings. Compounded type of blessings, because not only is it regularly virtuous and mustahab to fast on these 3 days, but you will also be fasting the 13th, 14th, and 15th of Sha'ban, where the Prophet ﷺ encourages, as much as you can, fast for the first half of this month. Because after the 15th, then you should refrain from fasting. But up until the 15th, following in the way of our Prophet ﷺ, fasting as much as you can, as much as possible, is extra blessings. On top of the fact that it's the month of Sha'ban, you have the 14th day will fall on a Thursday. The 14th day will fall on a Thursday. And you get the sunnah of also fasting on a Thursday. That can be an added virtue. And then the 15th of Sha'ban being the day following a virtuous night. Now, in general, whenever there is a virtuous night, you will find that it's usually followed by the fasting on that day. And that leads to another discussion that we had mentioned during the khutbah about a very blessed night. And that is the Laylatul Nisfi min Sha'ban, the 15th night of Sha'ban. If we haven't already, we should put a notification on our phones, on our calendars, as a reminder that this coming Thursday night is the 15th night of Sha'ban. And what has the Prophet ﷺ mentioned about this? He mentions in one particular hadith, إِذَا كَانَ لَيْلَةَ النِّصْفِ مِنْ شَعْبَانِ اطَّلَعَ اللَّهُ إِلَى خَلْقِهِ فَيَغْفِرُ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَيُمْلِي لِلْكَافِرِينَ وَيَدَعُ أَهْلَ الْحِقْدِ بِحِقْدِهِمْ حَتَّى يَدَعُوهُ. That when it is the middle night of Sha'ban, the middle night of Sha'ban is the 15th night of Sha'ban, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives special attention to His creation. And He forgives all of the believers. All of us know our own shortcomings. We all know our sins. We all know the things that we do in privacy that we shouldn't be doing. And we all know that we need Allah's mercy and we need His forgiveness. This is the Prophet ﷺ mentioning that on this night, Allah will give His special attention to the believers. And He will forgive them. He will forgive them. He even mentions in this particular hadith, وَيُمْلِي لِلْكَافِرِينَ, and then He'll give some respite to the disbelievers. That He won't snatch them up because of their disbelief. Rather, He will give them some respite that maybe you will change. Maybe you will realize that I actually exist. Maybe you will be guided. And this is also a good opportunity for those of us who have relatives, those of us who have friends, classmates, co-workers, people who are dear to us, maybe who are not a Muslim. These particular moments are those moments when the Prophet ﷺ mentioned He will give some respite to the disbeliever. For what? Perhaps they will believe. It may be a good opportunity to also share something of da'wah. Have a conversation with a friend on that particular evening. Have a conversation with a relative on that night that you might be able to have a conversation with and share something about our faith that may plant a seed of guidance in their hearts. And then the Prophet ﷺ also mentions, however, a condition. He does mention that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, however, will leave the people of malice and the people of enmity and grudges, the people of hatred, the people who harbor hatred in their heart towards others. Allah Ta'ala, this is the group of people that Allah won't forgive. He will leave them alone, meaning that He won't give them His special forgiveness until حَتَّى يَدَعَ حِقْدَهُمْ, until they leave their حَتَّى يَدَعُوهُ, until they leave their own enmity that they have. This is also consistent with, it's showing us how we attract Allah's forgiveness. We all want His forgiveness, but كَمَا تَدِينُ تُدَانُ, as you deal with people, you shall be dealt with. And as we deal with people, we shall be dealt with. If we really want forgiveness in our life, we have to be willing to forgive people. It's hypocritical to say that I want forgiveness, yet we hold grudges against others. And we're referring to personal things here. Someone did something to you, and maybe they were 100% wrong. Maybe they were 100% unfair. Maybe they were 100% oppressive to you. Well, how many times have we transgressed against Allah? How many times have we done something that Allah Ta'ala said, don't do this, and we did it? Yet we want Allah to forgive us. One of the most effective ways that we can ensure that Allah will forgive us is you be a person of forgiveness. Because Allah will never allow someone to be more generous than Him, more forgiving than Him. And on the Day of Judgment, those people who show up, having forgiven people, Allah will look at them and say that I'm more forgiving than you. You forgave them, I forgive you. This is how we attract His forgiveness. So in particular, even on that night when He's forgiving everyone, we have to be willing to forgive. Another hadith mentions also that on that night, فَيَغْفِرُ لِجَمِيعِ خَلْقِهِ إِلَّا لِمُشْرِكٍ أَوْ مُشَاحٍ. That again, the two people He won't forgive, one is a mushrik, which already is kind of understood, someone who associates partners with Allah. And one is again the person who harbors rancor and grudges in their heart. So it's something very clear that we have to try to refrain from. So that night is a very blessed night. I mentioned during the khutbah also that the night begins at the setting of the sun, once Maghrib enters, and it lasts until Fajr. So that special mercy, which is usually reserved for the last third of the night, it lasts for the entirety of the night. That special mercy, which normally descends in the last third of the night, it'll be present for the entirety of the night. So those times between Maghrib and Isha, after Isha, even if we don't wake up in the middle of the night, that we have an opportunity to seek that forgiveness and to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a way that is you can say almost unmatched. Why almost unmatched? Because the great tabi'i, Ata ibn Yasar rahimahullah, he actually mentions that this is the most virtuous night after Laylatul Qadr. That if you wanted to find something that you can compare to the Laylatul Nisf in Sha'ban, you'd have to go to like Laylatul Qadr to find a night that was more virtuous. وقال عطاء بن يسار رحمه الله ما من ليلة بعد ليلة القدر أفضل من ليلة النصف من شعبان يتنزل الله تبارك وتعالى إلى السماء الدنيا فيغفر لعباده كلهم إلا لمشرك أو مشاجر أو قاطع رحم. He mentions again that there's no night more virtuous than the 15th night of Sha'ban except for the night of Laylatul Qadr. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this night will descend to the lowest sky. This is what I'm referring to, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala normally descends to the lowest sky when there's حين يبقى ثلث الليل الآخر, the last third of the night, but this is for the entirety of the night. And He forgives all of His servants. He forgives all those believers, with the exception of the mushrik, the person who harbors rancor and enmity in their heart. And then what is added here is a qati' rahim, the one who severs family ties. Because usually there's a similarity, or there's a tie, there's a correlation. The people who have enmity and rancor towards others, oftentimes these are family members. And it's extremely sad to see this. Sons not speaking to their fathers, brothers not speaking to their sisters, nephews not speaking to their uncles, uncles not speaking to their nieces. Family ties have been broken because of a bad business deal, because someone took their land back in the bilad and didn't give them the inheritance, because someone wasn't invited to a wedding, because whatever the case may be. And no doubt, it's not to minimize it, it's not to say that it wasn't hurtful, but at the end of the day, no one will care on Yawm al-Qiyamah. No one's going to care on the last day about these personal transgressions. And you'd rather it that Allah Ta'ala forgave you for your shortcomings, that had I forgiven them, I would have been forgiven. So these are the type of things we try to remember. This night coming up again gets overlooked. It's referred to by the commentaries of the Quran, specifically Imam Fakhruddin al-Razi and Imam Alusi in his Ruh al-Ma'ani. he mentions that this is referred to as Laylatul Bara'ah, the night of exoneration, the night of freedom, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala frees us from all of our sins. So it's something that we should take notice to. And it comes again right on time, because we are getting ready to receive Ramadan. And we don't want to necessarily wait for Ramadan to seek that forgiveness. And I'll end with this, inshallah. I think we have some good food waiting for us. We don't want to wait for Ramadan to be forgiven. We want to try to actually enter Ramadan in a state of forgiveness. So this is one of those chances in this middle night of the month of Sha'ban, that we can be forgiven of our sins, so that as Ramadan approaches, we can enter into that month already in a state of forgiveness. If we do that, then the famous hadith where the Prophet ﷺ describes the month of Ramadan as being three parts: أَوَّلُهُ رَحْمَةٌ أَوْسَطُهُ مَغْفِرَةٌ وَآخِرُهُ عِتْقٌ مِنَ النَّارِ. That the first 10 days of Ramadan are mercy from Allah, the middle 10 days are forgiveness, and the last 10 days are salvation from the fire. One of the explanations of this hadith is that those people who enter Ramadan in a state of forgiveness, like there's some people who are very righteous, mashallah, very pious. They live their life throughout the year in a state of sinlessness, with minor exceptions that are forgiven from prayer to prayer and these type of things. For them, they are those who that first 10 days of Ramadan, right off the bat, they're getting Allah's mercy. But then there are others who, because of the sins that they've stained their hearts throughout the year, they need those first 10 days as a form of purification. And then the middle 10 days become a source of forgiveness for them. So they don't necessarily get that mercy right off the bat. It's a cleansing process, so they get forgiveness in the middle 10. And then there are others who throughout the year, they have not only transgressed, but they have fallen into the kaba'ir. They entered the month of Ramadan in a state of major sins, having in their records, in their sahifa. So those first 20 days of Ramadan, this is again the blessings of Ramadan. Allahumma balighna Ramadan. That those 20 days of Ramadan, of fasting and abstaining from sin and praying in the night, it becomes a source of purification for them, so that the last 10 days will be itqun min an-nar. It'll be a source of salvation from the fire, where they otherwise would have went to the fire had they died before Ramadan came. But for the people again who enter that month, the month of Ramadan, in a state of forgiveness, then those from the very beginning of Ramadan, they start receiving Allah's rahmah. So this is a chance for us to clean our books, clear our records on that blessed night, and leading up to that night, and then after that night, leading up until Ramadan. And Allah knows that we need it. A chance to clear our records with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a chance to be forgiven. And we know that there are a number of things that we can increase in our good deeds, but the one thing to take away from this is we try to clear our hearts of any type of grudges, and clear our hearts of any type of rancor or enmity that we feel towards others. Say, oh Allah, I forgive them. Not some surface level forgiveness, but a true forgiveness from our heart. And if you really want to know how to do that, if we really want to test ourselves, if I've forgiven someone, in the privacy of the night, pray and make dua for those people. If you really can free yourself of a grudge, you will be able to pray for that person and ask Allah to give that person the highest ranks of Jannah, to give them the best of this world, to put barakah in their life, to protect their children, to protect their families, to give them the best of this world and the hereafter, to give them more than I can ever have for myself. Those people who you feel you've been hurt by, make this type of dua for them, and you'll find Allah will start to remove that rancor in your heart that you may feel towards them. May Allah Ta'ala help us do that, so it will be a source of our own forgiveness. May Allah Ta'ala again bless us in the remainder of this month of Sha'ban, and allow us to witness the month of Ramadan. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على النبي الأمي وبارك وسلم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين آمين.